Hello, everyone. Welcome to Collisions YYC Current and Critical. I'm your host, Tyler Chisholm. Thank you for joining me today for another good old-fashioned chat. Today's show is brought to you in partnership with our newly minted relationship with SAIT Corporate Training. After 18 months and hundreds of conversations with the leaders, innovators, and the movers and shakers in our city, two things have become abundantly clear. The future of work has arrived, and it always has been all about the people. So whether you're an individual looking to upskill or an organization looking to reskill an entire division, SAIT has the team, the curriculum, and more importantly, the advisors to partner with you to build what you need to adapt for the road ahead. Do yourself a favor and take the time to learn a little bit more. Check them out at www.sait.ca/corporate training. And more importantly, give them a call, have a consultation, and find out what SAIT can do for you. Hello and a warm Collisions YYC welcome to Miss Chris Vanier. How are you, Chris?
Great. Thanks for having me today, Tyler.
It is absolutely my pleasure. We connected. I think Alberta Strikes Again. Somebody who knew me, who knew you, connected us, and we had a quick chat. And I'm excited. I think what you're up to is really incredibly interesting. So let's jump right into it. You're executive director of ISAIC at the University of Alberta. So I will turn it over and let you unpack that for us a little bit.
Great. I guess first, ISAIC stands for Industry Sandbox and AI Computing, which essentially means providing infrastructure for the future, computing resources, open, distributed, secure access to scalable computing related to local business. So for small and medium-sized enterprises across Alberta and across Western Canada. And I started as the executive director about a year ago now. So it's a pretty exciting time to take something from start to scale.
Oh, I love it. And I love a year in, especially the past year, which has been interesting on all fronts. It does not need a name. We all know what world we've been in. So let's just maybe help people really understand and cut right to the chase here. What problem did you guys set out to solve? So obviously you came together, you said, okay, there's a problem out here. It's holding us back in some way. We need to solve it. Boom, ISAIC was born. What was the core problem or the kind of core problem statement that got this thing started?
Well, interestingly, it was a group of innovators, entrepreneurs, inventors who really kickstarted this. And they partnered with the university. And really, the problem is that there's limitless demand. And the pace of evolution and the need for computational resources is constantly evolving. It's constantly growing. And so that, in some way, makes it a scarce resource. That means where there are resources, they just may not be as open, accessible, and efficiently allocated or managed that gets the benefit in the hands of small and medium-sized enterprises, where there's a large concentration of folks and of talent and domain expertise and interest in adopting AI, and yet the technology challenges might be under-recognized when it comes to computational resources. So they got together, a unique group, just like every problem to solve, and kickstarted this initiative back in 2017. It sort of evolved into a funding application and some joint contributions from each of those parties, and really was procured in 2019, came into alpha testing in 2020, and then we moved into beta and are now going live with over 50 clients, small and medium-sized enterprises. So it's a pretty exciting place to be.
That's amazing. I love so scenario. I'm sitting around, I'm hanging out with some startups and they're like, oh, we've got this great, like we've really figured out how we can use AI to solve this problem. And then all of a sudden they can't scale, they can't grow, they maybe can't even get out of the gate because access to computational resources is limited. So as a natural resource right beside talent for those types of organizations, this is literally the next important thing, or maybe one of the most important things to allow them to kind of get their idea off the ground or even get it into a point where they could test it, or am I oversimplifying?
Well, it's a great way to start, because I think you can look at tackling an AI challenge as a problem to solve, data and people. And then the computational resource is sort of a backbone, and often it's under-recognized because if you think about the landscape, there are a number of places that this can be accessed. You can use a gaming laptop. You can use something on premises in your facility.
Okay.
You can also, there's resources for researchers. There's also commercial and cloud resources that we're all aware of, Google, Amazon, AWS. And that sort of stitches out a landscape that provides comfort that these resources are available. Yet when you're actually tackling the challenge you want to solve, you may not be getting the hands-on support. Some researchers talk about the competition that they go through in order to get allocation for these resources. So they may not get the allocation that they're looking for. So it's sort of an interesting problem full of gaps here and there. And in particular, a great quote came from Joël Pinault at the Canada 2020 talks last year, that large corporations and companies like Facebook and Google have access to these. Have access to these resources and the funds to be able to get the latest and the greatest, where small and medium-sized enterprises may be just looking at tackling the first challenge. They really want to focus on ROI and value, and having that support, having an open, scalable way to start and iterate and have lower risk such that they can try something new, especially in an environment like right now, when we're all looking at survivability and building into the future, is really important. There's 430,000 small and medium-sized enterprises in Western Canada, thereabouts, according to Industry Canada.
That's a powerful number. And that's from everything from a 2-person up to, like, what would qualify in that number in terms of size?
Everything. Startups, scale-ups, anything. And so it's about 90% of the workforce, but they're really only contributing a smaller portion of GDP, about half, by the stats. So how do we move things forward? And often we look at infrastructure as a backbone. So though it may not be glamorous, some types of infrastructure for the future are going to be necessary, and that's the role we look to play. And then connecting those dots between entrepreneurs, inventors, innovators, and the domain experts that are required to move these things forward now that they have a virtual environment in which to do that.
Interesting. So curious a little bit about the balance of, there was a group of innovators or a group of people that, 3 years ago, you said 2017, they came together, connected with the university and said, hey, we've got a problem. We want to solve it. We think can solve it. Something I don't know a lot about and I'm curious about is that ability, and I'm hearing about it more and more, for the traditional, for-profit sector to partner with typically post-secondary or not, whatnot, are looked at as maybe always the leaders in business, but yet I'm hearing more and more. I had Deborah Karash from U of C on the other day talking about the world of biotech, and she goes, all of a sudden, to be a professor and also be an entrepreneur on the side is becoming this really cool thing, where she goes, maybe down the road we're going to have less professors and more entrepreneurs that used to be professors. So she got to present it as this interesting culture shift for post-secondary, where all of a sudden being innovative and getting out there and playing in that space, especially in Western Canada, is starting to become a lot more culturally the way it goes. So, how much of that is played into this? And then I'm curious of where it ends up down the road, because the ones you talked about, AWS, Google, these are for-profit businesses and I have to go and give them my money. The fact that we're doing it this way, does it promote a little bit more support for local as well? So sorry, 17 questions asked at once, one of my talents, I realize. But, backing it up, how are you seeing it, the roles of post-secondary and for-profit businesses kind of playing together to create this innovation ecosystem?
Brilliant question, and absolutely resonates with the case of one of the founders. So the reason that this was started up, and it was originally called a hub, the hub in the sense of being the center point for connecting researchers, entrepreneurs, innovators. So bringing together small and medium-sized enterprises with researchers, or helping, we've identified this client case of enterprising researchers who are, looking to commercialize a technology. And absolutely, that's a big part of where Isaac fits, and where the universities and technical colleges are also looking and heavily involved. And in the case of this particular client in the health sector, working with researchers and clinicians is essential. Access to data, especially health-related data, and having that pairing with a principal investigator. And then the entrepreneurial spirit and knowing how to take that product to market or wrap it in the form of a product that's marketable is huge. And where we provide the backbone for that from a computational perspective, you've mentioned a few times, it's sort of powering that ambition and providing the sandbox for that collaboration. And interestingly, at that time, Isaac wasn't necessarily visioned as a virtual environment, but naturally it was a virtual environment. And now we've all become so accustomed to them that it's that's what it is. And that idea of a hub is really foundational to where we look at as our role in the ecosystem by enabling access to these unique groups coming together, enabling access if it's in relation to data or the space for sandboxing and progressing ideas faster than they may have if it was any individual on their own.
Right. That accelerator. And also the networking. So originally it was the idea of kind of creating collisions and creating a hub for people to come together to learn from each other and share resources, where the natural, like not only the service you provide, but the environment we've been in the last 12 months, it's not virtual anymore. It's just called the way we do it, right?
Fair point. We've definitely adapted. Pivoted and everything in between.
Yeah, it's in our world. You can't call it digital marketing anymore. Just call it marketing. It's okay. Everybody gets it. It just kind of becomes what it does. We don't need that to clarify. So does Isaac live separate from the university, or is it very clearly like, are we dealing with like the university as an entity, Isaac as an Isaac as an entity, and then all of a sudden you mentioned you had 50 companies in this beta phase. Is it a third body sitting by itself, or is it directly tied to and part of the University of Alberta?
I'd say a bit of both, and it's beyond the University of Alberta. Like we're in conversations with the University of Calgary. We have part of our staffs from BC and connected to the universities there. Like we're continually trying to look at that expansion across Western Canada in the sense of who can we serve and how can we do better together. Having said that, our structure is linked to the University of Alberta at this point, and it's really operating as an independent lab type entity. So the structure is not necessarily a new thing for universities. There's examples like a fabrication facility that's located. So it's independently operated, but also kept close enough to benefit with certain, I would say, educational advantages. So one of the things is our security and audit process. As a large institution, we can implement and undertake significant security exercises and audit reviews for, serving clients in, say, the health sector, that a small enterprise of maybe 4 or 5 people might not be able to undertake. So we look to extend the benefits of the university environment into the small and medium-sized enterprises, and vice versa. Extend some of the entrepreneurial spirit and that enterprising experience from the small and medium-sized enterprises into the university. So it's kind of a mutual benefit, and the distributed aspect of it is really important as well. So linking across different institutions and looking at the network effect when we operate as one Alberta, one Western Canada, and especially related to activity that's always undertaking on the world stage.
So you beat me to one of my questions around who gets access to this. Like those 50 companies you're talking about, are they all Alberta? Because you started, because you're in Edmonton today, correct?
Yes.
Yes, I didn't think we needed to call it out because it feels like we're working. None of us live on an island or in a dome. But this is bigger than Alberta when you talk about reaching out into the BC market. So those 50 companies that you're talking to, are they all based in Alberta, or are they just based in Western Canada?
Western Canada.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Western Canada. Yeah.
So curious, those companies, or sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. I cut you off. I'm already jumping to my next question. Go ahead.
I would say they're geographically, we have companies Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC at this point in time.
Okay.
And for sure, there's more in Alberta at this point, just because that's where we started, and we're looking to, serve beyond that. At the same time, the opportunity for us working with different partners might enable a different strategy going forward. At this point, we're lucky to have helped companies across various sectors: agriculture, health, fintech, marketing. So it's really quite a mix. Some of them have researchers affiliated with them, some don't at all.
Right.
So it's really quite a unique mix, and I think that's what speaks to the space that this gap serves, that it provides a different access than maybe would have been available. And the other thing we're noticing is instruction in AI. So courses in AI have exploded. There's definitely a lot of growth. And for those professors or instructors to have access to resources at a scale that can serve 50 students when, 2 years ago they might have had 5 or 10, or there might not have been a course at all. We've started working with some of the institutions to ensure that they have access to the computational resources they need to instruct and create opportunities for the next generation of professionals, students as a next generation, as well as professionals looking to upskill. So there's lots of different courses made available, and that's a huge part of what we're doing right now as well.
It's so easy to forget. For me, it's easier when you think about it, like a fabrication. You think about a lot of the trades, you had to have a place to go try the thing and to do the work, or go in the lab to run the experiment, or whatever the case may be. Now that happens to be virtual, but it's no less important that you've got an infrastructure that can support it. Because how much can you learn in those environments if you don't get to do it, if you don't get to do your test project or whatever the case may be? I always have these revelations that all of a sudden I'm like, that sounds super obvious. But when you don't think it through, go, yeah, we're pushing all of these individuals to get training in everything from blockchain. They need somewhere to practice their craft.
Exactly. You've actually landed on exactly why we came to the name Isaac, and the operation as, our 3 pillars as the AI garage, the hub, and the data sandbox. It's the application that enables adoption and commercialization for AI and digital technologies. So each one of those components is really important and necessary, and the faster we're able to move through them and support them, hopefully the better off all of those tinkerers and doers, hackers and hustlers will be able to exploit their craft.
I love that your personas are tinkers and hustlers and doers. I'm like, sorry, you rhymed those off. I'm like, those are great personas from a marketing perspective. Who are the hustlers? Who are the doers? Who are the tinkerers? But that's incredibly powerful when you think about this new world of like, who's in the garage coming up with what idea. That garage is now virtual, but it still needs to exist. And you still need the soldering iron or the whatever tool I just have pictures of the guys putting computers together in their garage, just a new version of that same mindset. So it just makes a ton of sense when I hear you lay it out that way.
Yeah. Well, that's a great story because one of our clients is like in synthetic data, and they send us pictures, or they talk about we can move from 100 seconds to 1 second in our computational, and they're so excited about it, and you think about that, and it's impressive that we've come to a place where seconds and milliseconds make such significant difference in the ability to generate meaning and insight from these huge data sets, and that's a really exciting space to be. Or the other, we had a client who was really excited to share working with a technology like a Raspberry Pi or I think it was a Jetson Nano. Excuse me, I'm not an inventor myself, more of an innovator and on that side of things, but and was really excited over a spring break project to do some exciting work about automating how his lawn gets mowed. And I thought, this is incredible. Or the hackathons that we support and the things that they come up with are problems in the field that they can wrap technology into, and then do training in the cloud and bring that back to something in production space, or create a solution for a company. And it's pretty incredible, actually.
So from an accessibility standpoint, like what I'm hearing, and I'm not to layer in larger like social issues that we're dealing with, but we live in a world where we're focusing heavily on inclusion and belonging. And what I'm really hearing is like this also provides a level of democratization. It provides a level of access, and it's like giving somebody who doesn't have access to tools, a garage full of tools, and going, hey, what could you create? Like, oh my God, what am I going to create? When I hear you talk and that excitement that comes out in your voice, when we talk about whether obviously the world we're on this stage, but in Alberta, the topic of the last 5 years, how are we going to diversify? How are we going to innovate? How are we going to be different for the future? If we can't provide universal access to the tools that are the future, it's going to be pretty hard to do that, right? You can only get so far with a piece of paper and a pencil.
Yeah. I think it's a great spin on the quote, like the popular Gibson quote, actually, you make me think of. As the future gets here, as we create the future, we'd like it to be more evenly distributed. So how do we create it in a way that allows for that to happen and allows the creative mashups that need to happen between people? And you've talked about that prior on your podcasts where, it's people coming together, and now we're adding data to that equation. And, the messiness of working with data and the messiness of combining that with a problem that's worthy of solving, it takes some real energy, and it takes a hub. And we have many assets, whether they're accelerators or support organizations. And this is just another piece of that puzzle that we get to enable, or that we get to play, the role we get to play in order to enable that future that you're talking about.
I love that you used that quote. I've seen it floating around and kind of dug down on it a few years back, and the future's already here. It's just not evenly distributed. How do you flip that around to be actually something much more positive and much more as we focus on, we're all in it together. So let's actually act that way. So curious about the process. So I'm on your website, and I'm kind of course, I'm a professional creeper, checking it out. And it says book a discovery. It doesn't say sign up. It doesn't say buy now. It says book a discovery. And that, to me, as a marketer, has a very distinctive meaning to it, that, you know what, you don't just put in a credit card and we give you access. This is, we're actually going to talk with you, and we're going to understand what you're trying to do and maybe how to best help you. That's what I think it means. Maybe you can kind of clarify to me, what is the process if I'm listening and I didn't know, and I'm now listening and I'm in front of my computer and I'm thinking about getting involved. What does that process look like from a company or innovator's standpoint?
Yeah, I'm exactly that, a discovery. So our focus is to support through infrastructure and applied knowledge the adoption and commercialization of AI in Western Canada. And that means getting to know the company and their goals, getting to know the startup, getting to know the conversion, and understanding those goals is as important to identifying the environment that they need as the specifics and technical knowledge of that environment. It's oftentimes that we will get a technical and a business person involved in a conversation as well. And that's really important, because in some cases, if we're only working with the technical team, our ML side would characterize the computational needs and the requirements in a specific way. But if we're able to unpack maybe some of those university or other ecosystem partner resources that are available, maybe there's support there as well. Maybe there's student capacity or a researcher that's really active in that space. Maybe there's another institution that would serve this company's acceleration a little bit more, maybe an association or an event. And I think that that's part of the discovery process. Having said that, it can be a discovery process by form. Like, we have a quick automated way to get on where folks just sign up and we're validating some basic information. And then the more long-term relationship-oriented supports as well.
So what I'm hearing in that comment is, yes, you can get access to computational power, but there is a lot more resources available back to the hub and back to the community and kind of the overword ecosystem word, that there's a lot of infrastructure in there to support people on their journey, as well as getting access to computational power.
Yeah, absolutely. The University of Calgary, has, or CIC is a great example. The Calgary Innovation Coalition. There's dozens of partners involved in the success of these companies. And I think if we look at our role in some sense, infrastructure as a backbone, then that spinal cord, or that cord, has to connect to all of those different nerves and systems that generate results in different ways, and send more thorough supports across the. I guess that supports your style of analogies, but more thorough supports across the whole system.
No, it's interesting, and I appreciate, again, that's why I love long form content. If we would have had 5 minutes, I would have missed like 2/3 of the story. I would never have got into take it apart. So when you think about the back end that you guys do from a technical perspective, how much is this a very specific built infrastructure here in Alberta? Do you guys have partners globally that act as the backbone? Maybe getting into the technical side of, I'm just thinking, is this a big warehouse somewhere full of high-powered computers that allow people to do this, or do you also have partners on that side of the house? I'm getting way down the rabbit hole here on the technical side.
Well, I will love to unpack that for you in the coming year.
Okay.
Obviously, getting started in the first, we've just gotten started, so we do have infrastructure available, and it's through the University of Alberta. We work with partners like Cybera across Alberta. We're in conversations with other folks, WestGrid, University of Calgary. So how we evolve in that, to really serve the need at the level that it's growing, is how we look at our future. And for the time being, our focus is Western Canada and small and medium-sized enterprises or enterprising researchers and AI instructors. Having said that, the technology providers are definitely global. So we're excited to, review Dell, like everything from across the board. And it evolves extremely quickly, which is one of the challenges for most small and medium-sized enterprises. So you really have the choice with computational equipment of on-prem, your own, laptop or server, commercial cloud, or the research-related resources. And that would, that's 3 of 4 quadrants. If you want a local open quadrant in the past, and for other types of computation, there's data centers. And so folks will look at co-location in data centers. AI is a little bit different, and this type of like GPUs, TPUs can be a little bit different because the high needs for computation are in the early phases of inference and training. And then once it goes into production, you don't have that same scale of need. So it's really a model that supports sharing very well. And that's exactly what our founders noted is we can get a lot more out of our budget if we share this stuff. And when I need high power, I get high power. When I need scalability and elasticity, then I get access to it. But I can also share it when I don't need it. So that's really the goal. And then having that security and being able to wrap around some of those other support services is where the real value add comes in.
I like we do live in the share economy, but the elasticity and understanding that not everyone's at the same cycle of need at the same time, which is what actually allows it to work. It's like if back in the old days, if everyone showed up at the gym at the same time who actually had a membership, you couldn't fit them all in the gym, but that's okay. They're not going to all show up at the same time. That's a really weak analogy, but back in the good old days when we used to be able to go to the gym if we wanted to.
Perfect analogy, minus the sweat and, the 24-hour access is pretty applicable as well.
Yeah. Well, it's a stretch.
Really
I know. That was weak. That was not my best analogy for a metaphor for the day. When you curious on the global stage, like this sounds innovative. It sounds awesome for Alberta. It clearly sounds like something that is a key ingredient to what we need to go forward when it becomes the democratization and access to people with all of these other things around. It's not just computational power. Is this a model that you looked at globally, that you looked for inspiration, and maybe that, and where did you look for this type of model, and where are we in the cycle in terms of our, those 430,000 companies you mentioned, initially? When we look to the US or we look to Europe or we look to Asia, where do we sit on that? Or do you have a perspective on what the global landscape looks like? Because we're not competing locally. We're competing much on a broader scale than that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In some sense, the model is new. In some sense, it's based on proven technology. So that's the benefit of being at a university. We're really looking to exploit for the companies who are wanting to just start this out, who are maybe in later phases, the known technology. And where there are some others, we have a few real leaders that are moving into the spaces of edge computing. They're working a lot with IoT or sensors. We definitely want to, because of the position at the university, and make available what is useful for them. So it's a really great position to be in that we can offer both at a scale or when the needs meet each other.
Okay.
And globally, I would suggest there's a lot of different things. I mean, I feel lucky to have had the opportunity to visit innovation labs and sandboxes in different environments, whether they're for hotel chains in Hong Kong or the innovation lab in London, or like there's different things going on everywhere. And this is sort of a reuse of many different models, I guess. And so I wouldn't suggest that what we're doing is completely new. It might be novel, and it's more tailored and customized to the approach that Alberta. So when you're implementing something that causes transformation, I mean, it's important to consider the cultural context that you're in. Whether the model that Dubai uses is relevant to Calgary, you'd have to look at a lot of different factors. We're not a desert, obviously. So some of the things that need to be localized can be localized, and some of the things that we can draw from as leading examples in the world can be more global. Like there's a good, the MI Garage in the UK is one that we look at, and they are looking at ethics and data frameworks and funding supports, whereas our AI Garage is more looking at the virtual environments. So we're able to draw different things from examples around the world. In Eindhoven, there's a data or a computational complex, I guess you could call it, that's working with the Technical Institute. So we're able to draw examples from that. The commercial providers and hybrid solutions, we also have a lot to learn from them. And making sure that we can bridge the space that's relevant to our companies and their success is what we're striving to achieve, so that they can be competitive on the global scale.
How much work and how much effort is being put in, and I'm assuming a lot, it's kind of a weird loaded question, to make sure you guys are staying in the right lane or knowing what lane is the best? Like you said, you're kind of playing a space between, there's the commercial side, there's I guess to me it sounds like that creates a lot of discipline. I really like what you said about like understanding the culture of where we are and what's needed here, not only from a geographic, we don't live in a desert, we don't, we live in a very stable environment. Geographically, what does that mean? But from your business, like you're still providing a service, I'm assuming how has it been on the journey of really understanding like where we should put our own guardrails to make sure that we stay focused? And it feels like you could get easily pulled in different directions as a service provider yourselves.
Oh, absolutely. I feel lucky that I had spent some time working with some other folks, and the partners that we have in the ecosystem are so fantastic. And like Amy's a good example. I know you had Cam Linky on earlier in the year, and the CIC in Calgary grouping together and looking at providing that umbrella for a number of different organizations that support entrepreneurs. So we are maybe you could say, go back to that analogy, inventors and entrepreneurs, hackers and hustlers. We're really looking at the space for hackers and inventors, the tinkerers and the doers, and the types of technology that allow them to come up and solve problems. And yet it's really important to connect with the Venture Mentoring Society or the A100 as they strive for 75,000 tech jobs in Alberta, because we serve a specific role, and that's infrastructure and applied knowledge. So how do you take infrastructure and make it available, but also attach the applied knowledge and the connection to partners and resources that enable the overall complexity of a startup to move forward? So a problem can be tinkered at forever. It also has to be worth solving and marketable in some sense. And so that may not be our expertise, but we get to work with really fantastic partners from accelerators, Creative Destruction Labs, or Discovery Lab this week, or with Amy, who does a lot of different training and provides different resources, or AI in BC, for example, or Emily in the ag space. So knowing that landscape is really important to helping these companies be successful in part of what we can offer them.
Speaking to that landscape, part of the journey I've been on also even in the last couple of years through doing the show and talking to guests is really seeing it evolve. And sometimes, there's a combination of like, where is our ecosystem versus what am I not aware of? I think Alberta, we're really good at not necessarily being fully aware of what's going on across the street. Part of why we started the show. And I'm not saying it's a negative. We're so busy doing our thing. How have you even seen, how is the ecosystem evolving? I like what you said, like, it takes there's many chefs in the kitchen here to kind of to create this new cake we're baking here. Some weird analogies today. I don't know. I'm going to the gym and I'm eating cake. How is it coming together? Is it evolving? Are we on a good pace? Is it still disconnected? Like, as me being the hacker and the inventor, do I get lost in it, or is it starting to become a little more clear to navigate from your perspective as we slowly kind of get definitions and lanes and clarity and people get known versus unknown?
I appreciate the question, and I would suggest that, there's always a healthy degree of fragmentation. The new term that's come up, co-opetition. One of the greatest places I've ever looked at leadership was related to the Renaissance in Florence. And one of the concepts was like putting Da Vinci and Michelangelo as collaborators and also competing for some of the greatest pieces of art during the whole period. So we lift the boat by lifting each other. So in certain spaces, and coming before this, one of my roles was in the engineering, architecture, and environmental space. And in a lot of large projects, you can be competitive with a certain bidder, and then on the next project, they're your biggest partner. So it's really learning this dance of when to compete and when to cooperate. And collaboration is tricky, and that's what makes it worthwhile. Diversity is tricky, and that's what gives it the best innovative ideas. And we need to have the courage to go there. And I mean, having the privilege of being able to travel and spend time in some of these other spaces, one of the things I love most about here is that we do have the opportunity to bring this together. We're in a great, healthy space as Canadians and Albertans with a variety of different skill sets. And we have a strength in engineering, a strength in, a number of construction, energy-related industries, health, and how we bring that to the table for enabling the future is kind of part of the challenge. And I guess, your question was, are we working better together? Sure, we're always moving forward and we're moving better together. And we're also fragmenting at the same time. And we shouldn't be afraid of that. There's always going to be growth and togetherness, and there's always going to be folks falling off to the side and being reinvented. And people are resilient. So one of my favorite quotes was from the Innovation Leadership Forum, and it says, and one of the leaders says, people aren't afraid of change. They change all the time. They don't like being changed or having change forced upon them. So we need to give each other the courage to take on that challenge. And we look at Isaac, or we need to give each other the space to take on that challenge. And that's, I guess, the way I look at being a hub and being in a virtual environment for tinkering and doing.
Oh, you had me at co-opetition. That's my new word for this. I'm like, I have not heard that before. I hear a lot on the show and a lot of acronyms and a lot of metaphors, but really interesting. And you're right. The whole iron sharpens iron. And, I love that rising tides raise all boats, but sooner or later, a boat race gets you really motivated to tune up your boat.
You nailed it.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I love the way you positioned that. So if we were making bets, any industries or sectors or things that you're seeing that get you excited, or you've got optimism around in terms of is it, IoT in Alberta, I know is a big movement to be recognized here for that. Is it, some of the work we're doing around machine learning and AI, or what Amy's leading on? And I hear a lot of different horses in the race, and I think they're all good and they're all exciting, but anything that you see that gets you maybe just excited, your own just kind of point of view on where we're innovating and where, that has some legs in this environment here in Alberta.
From a sector perspective, what I can offer is kind of what we see, really looking at adoption, and ag tech is really exciting. The health sector space and what we're enabling there. And I mean, that's partly driven by the global environment and the conditions that we're in. Energy is obviously undergoing its own transition. And, some of the early adopters related to AI, legal tech, fintech, are also marketing uses. So they're actually finding transformative applications, which is really exciting. So depending what part of the innovation spectrum or adoption spectrum you're on, I think there's different industries. So the revolutionary opportunity for sensors in agriculture, for example, is quite different than the power of algorithms in marketing to help us understand consumer patterns. So quite a different environment, but every company, as you mentioned, it's a discovery process. So every company we learn from, and we grow together. One of the companies right now, we're looking at how do we improve rural connectivity. We had a hackathon around that, and they're challenging us to look at how we get these massive data sets they're collecting in remote places back to the cloud. And sure, it's once you have it on the resources that are already in an urban space, it makes it workable. But actually doing that transfer and figuring that out is one of the things we have to look to do together. And one of the challenges we have in Western Canada and Canada in general.
is our back to access, back to being able to get people. You get very spoiled around your internet connection when you're in the city or inside city limits. I did a few podcasts. I did a podcast on one of my other shows with a rancher, and she's like, Tyler, it's like I got 3 megabytes of upload today. Like, it's a good day. Like, this is as good as it's going to get. So I hope it works. And it's like, wow, here's me just taking for granted when my high speed is a little bit off, and I'm finicky about it. But you think about ag, you think about the energy sector and the remoteness of what goes on in Canada in general, and the data sets that the data is collected there, and how does it get uploaded and make its way into a place that someone could then now use it on your platform to solve the problem we're solving. I love you said that a couple times in the show. Curious question just around the role, the funding model. And again, I don't know how much detail you want to get into, like provincial, local. You've got private investors. You've got through the universities and some of maybe the challenges around funding that have been happening there. So, any perspective on kind of where our government has been provincially around funding and supporting projects like you guys are working on? And I know that's maybe a tricky question to ask. If you want to take the fifth on this one, you can.
Love the tricky questions. They're always the best ones, right? And that's your job. I would suggest, or I would say that we can, from a standpoint of our work, we continue to look at sustainability as a combination of public and pay-for-use funding. Mm-hmm. At the same time, it really takes courage and foresight by the government and it's a difficult choice, like trade-offs. So I wouldn't profess to be in any special knowledge of where they should be decisioning around this funding, but I think it is an opportunity to look at and reflect. So when we're in an environment of prosperity, it's easy to just distribute everything and not necessarily really look at what's delivering the most value, where the opportunity we are now really gives that opportunity and provides that impetus. So either way, as a taxpayer or as someone who's contributing on both sides, I'm happy when we have these opportunities for review. And I don't think it's a simple process. So I wouldn't want to, offer that there is always value in every sector and in every space, and discerning what is of most value and, like you said, provides the most equality and benefit is challenging. And going back to, I guess we want a more equal contribution. And when I look at those 430,000 companies, they're only contributing, or they can be amplified in their contribution to GDP with the right types of contributions. And so we look to provide that through a service and by being a backbone. And if the government is supporting those backbones and supporting those services, then we benefit, and we all benefit from the rising tide.
That's where you get that amplification effect, right? Of I couldn't agree with you more. It's no easy task to pick the horse that's good, that you think is going to win, or the group that you want to kind of fund. But you're right. In times of past, when there was money aplenty, you didn't have to be as discerning, and those harder decisions didn't have to be made. And there's always someone's not going to like the decision that gets made. So it's a tough setting. But how do we create more like infrastructure? I don't want to use the 10x, but how do we create something that's going to amplify that 430,000 in a way that's going to be beneficial, knowing that not all are going to make it, or not all are going to have the impact that we want? Yeah, without getting too pointing fingers, it gets kind of philosophical really quick, doesn't it?
I think this is only my view. I think that it's important that we have the business cycle. Things go up and down, and they give us these opportunities to reflect. And choosing winners isn't necessarily the job of everyone. So we've been lucky to benefit from the system we have, where the market helps us choose who those are. And I think that I feel privileged having the opportunity to look at infrastructure for the future in the first place. Being some other places in the world, we may not have that opportunity, or we may not even be starting from a place close to equity. So the fact that our basic needs are covered, and that we have the opportunity to look forward and create the future and create the wealth and the quality of life that we want here as a result of that is is kind of the goal. And whether you're government, whether you're a service provider, whether you're a commercial entity, we each contribute in our own ways.
Yeah, let's not forget how fortunate we are to be starting up a little bit higher on that pyramid of like economic actualization, right? There's a lot of rungs below that we don't even consider while we're sometimes complaining about the rung we're on. So thinking about the future, am I okay to call you a startup? Are you a startup yourselves?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what? Yeah, what? Yeah, startup. What other words would you throw? Because I'm like, well, you guys are pretty new. You're a year out. You're still figuring it out. Startup felt like it fit.
Yeah, absolutely. We're looking. We operationalized through the course of this year, and we have a great group of clients who are continuing to help us learn. So. Lucky to be taking the approach and the mentorship of many of the startups that I've worked with in the past in different companies, and looking at our minimum viable product and building out from there.
Chris, I don't imagine there's many dull days in your world with just the myriad of stakeholders alone that you get to converse with on a regular basis.
Is there a dull day in anyone's world these days?
No, fair enough. Some maybe have a little more, fireworks than others. So what do you see? What's the next couple of years for you guys in terms of how you see this unfolding from your current vantage point?
Considering the pace that this evolution happens and where AI is at and where some of the companies have ambitions, I think that we need to have similar ambitions. It's how do we partner across Western Canada? How do we collaborate in a way that's distributed, that remains open to the point that is accessible and doesn't cost any of that IT divorce or that platform effect that companies have to work through if they commit to a commercial provider, and yet offer the benefits of platform as a service or that really enable acceleration. So with our business, it's a combination, as we said in the beginning, of people knowledge, computational resources, and data. And right now, when you're looking at AI adoption, 60 to 80% of the time is spent cleaning up, understanding, and building quality data. So we have to really understand where the sandboxing aspect of our business needs to grow and where the platforms to enable that capacity for data, working with data, and then also partnering with folks who have the deep data science expertise that can complement the computational resources and virtual environment that we offer.
In terms of timeline, are we still on that part of the journey where still more and more companies are bringing that data forward and are still at that phase? Like I would imagine we'll get to a point where that now new data being collected is being connected in a more opportune way for then to be able to bring AI to bear, machine learning to bear on it. But I've had a few people on talking about like there's just such a debt right now in terms of technology for so many companies of just trying to get to a place that they can start to even think about getting some value out of this data, but that cycle will run its course. I'm assuming over the next couple of years as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's a Deloitte report that talked about 70-ish% of Canadian companies don't make use of AI right now, but more than half of those companies think that we should lead in AI, like Canada, and we do have. So it's kind of bridging that gap, and with data, we are seeing 3 clients this week I can think of right off the top of my head. We're really looking at storage solutions as they continue to build data sets, as they're looking at their training, but needing to aggregate data from different vantage points or collect data from their organization and clean it in a way that makes it useful to the problem that they're trying to solve. So I can't profess to be a data scientist, but I definitely understand that this is a significant time requirement and that it's a very important first mover advantage. And that can lead to significant barriers of entry if we're not actively looking at how we can capitalize on these data sets. Everyone refers to the health data, for example. In the ag space, we see, folks talking from the field or the grower perspective, and the degree of trust that's required in order to start working with and collecting data sets at the field and farm level or grower level, and how that can be maximized in the later commercial interests and who that benefits and how that benefits. So we definitely have some challenges to work through.
Exciting times ahead is the short footnote on all of this in terms of where it's going to go, and so much of it is still being figured out as we go. Like, these words and terms and acronyms get thrown around a lot, but it is really early days for a lot of organizations, and there is still a lot of discovery. There's still a lot of discovery yet to unfold.
Yeah, I really appreciate that as a commentary, because it's exactly what you see. The early adopters are well down the road, and they're kind of like, well, why isn't everyone else here? But the really significant majority is still catching up. And so who does that discovery serve, and how do we play a role in supporting each of these entities so that they can do something that creates business value for what they're doing, or the transformation that's required to take their business into the future or create a new business entirely. And it's exciting. You asked me earlier about areas of excitement. I love hearing the new companies, legal tech, where they're disrupting a whole industry because they're disintermediating what's required from insurers for making claims. So some of the solutioning that comes forward is really game changing, and other solutions with sensors, for example, can be entirely incremental. And how we support all of those is what creates composite value, in my view.
I appreciate everything from a sensor to a complete new way and sometimes new industries emerge out of these new ways of doing things, or disrupting the way we've always done it, which back to your comment about change, can be scary if it's being done to you. So it behooves us all to kind of get involved in the change and feel like we're a little more part of it than getting run over by it occasionally, which technology can be scary sometimes that way if it's happening to you. I like that, the way you clarified that. Yeah, we change all the time, but I don't like it when someone else makes me change. We are still humans and a little bit messy, are we not?
That's what makes life interesting.
Yes, it does. Or we'd be bored. It would make for boring podcasts otherwise. Chris, amazing chatting with you today. You gave me so many things to think about. My brain's spinning 100 miles an hour, which is my guilty pleasure of why I get to talk to really cool people like you. What's the best way for people? Is it your website is a little bit of a mouthful, but I did type in just Isaac, and you guys came up right away. So good work on the acronym. Is that the best way for people to learn more and to dive in? Is go check out your website? Absolutely.
Isaac.ca or Isaac.ai, and can definitely reach out. The tech team is available at support@Isaac.ca. So nice. Via email, and then there's contact information right there on the website, and definitely my LinkedIn profile. Happy to chat and connect there as well.
And you guys, kudos. You guys did a good job on your website, by the way. Something like so many times I see technically oriented companies that their website is like, what's happening here? You guys did a really good job on your site. So kudos to you on that one. So go check it out. It's a good user experience.
Well, I will definitely give kudos to the lovely Calgary-based company that we worked with. So not only
they did a good job.
Yeah, in our procurement, we're going local too.
Fantastic. Well, kudos to you guys for the fantastic work you're doing, and more importantly, for the problem you're solving and the opportunities you're helping accelerate for the future of this amazing province. So thank you for that. And Chris, it was great chatting with you.
Have a great afternoon, Tyler.
Thank you. You as well.